Daniel, how are you? Welcome. Thank you for being with us. Let's start with the basics. Literally the title of the book, noise. Can you describe it for us? What do you mean by noise?
Well, what I mean by noise is really the same as in measurement noise. It is unwanted variability. So when people are judging the same thing in a system where you would like them to speak in one voice, if they don't speak in one voice, that is noise. And we have found that wherever there is judgment, there is noise, and there is much more of it than most people expect. That's why we wrote the book.
So how is that different from bias? There's been a lot of attention on bias in recent years and very little on noise. How is that different?
Well, it's easiest to explain by thinking about measurement of distance. So when you're measuring a line, the length of a line, with a very fine ruler, there's going to be variability in your measurement. That variability, the standard deviation of your measurement, is noise. The average error in your measurement, that is bias. And in the theory of measurement, noise and bias are basically equivalent. The standard formula for inaccuracy, for global error, is the square of bias plus the square of noise. And that applies as well to judgments when the goal of judgments is accuracy.
So, if I understand correctly, we can see inaccuracy in terms of bias in like a single decision. We cannot see noise in a single decision. Noise is more of a collective, aggregated kind of problem. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Noise is a statistical concept. You need an ensemble of cases to detect noise. Bias is actually a sort of causal notion. So that makes it a lot easier to think about bias because you can see bias affecting or imagine bias affecting a single decision, but you will never find noise in a single decision.
So how, keeping in mind we are talking to a global audience here via the live stream, how do we reduce noise in decision making, in our daily decision making?
Well, in the book we propose a notion of decision hygiene. Those are steps that one can take when one is making judgments deliberately and slowly, whether individually or as in a group, that will tend to reduce noise and actually reduce bias as well. And there are a number of them. The most obvious one is just having multiple people make a judgment of the same case, because unlike bias, noise is reduced systematically with a number of observation or with a number of independent judgments. And there are many other procedures.
Yeah, indeed, you indicate another, but are you suggesting that the more noise there is, the more we need a number of different inputs to be able to reduce it? Or different decisions?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there is another mechanism you describe in the book, which is essentially to create rules or algorithms to go through that, which comes down to either checklist or breaking down the problem in different pieces and a whole series of things. Tell us about that. Tell us about that mechanism for reducing noise.
Well, any rule and any algorithm has a characteristic that it is noise-free, that when you apply the rule or apply the algorithm twice on the same problem, you are going to get the same answer. This is not true of human judgment. And it turns out in a great deal of research that one of the main advantages, and in many cases the one advantage of algorithms and rules over human judgment, is that they are noise-free and human judgment is very noisy.
So basically, that means that artificial intelligence systems, for example, have an inherent advantage over humans against noise. Is that correct?
It's correct, and actually in multiple domains. I mean, this is known to everyone, but in domains that even include justice and medical diagnosis, algorithms are already superior to human judgment, and it's clear that an algorithm are almost equivalent to human judgment. Question of time. In a very short time, the algorithm becomes superior. This was true for chess. It's true for areas of medical diagnosis. It's true for judgment, for judicial decisions, at least easy decisions, like in the case of bail.
Yet there is healthcare. I kind of understand because a tumor is a tumor, but in the case of the judicial process, there is a margin of appreciation by the judge and by the prosecutor, etc. How do you build that into the system that has to sift through noise?
Well, the amount of noise in the judicial system is simply shocking. Just to give you an indication, in an experiment in a study of federal judges, when the average sentence for a crime is 7 years, the average difference between two judges is 4 years. This is the lottery that a defendant faces when a defendant is faced with a judge. So there is a lot of room for reducing noise in the judicial system.
Okay, let's bring this down to the level of the individual. I go home tonight and I feel overwhelmed by all the information of the world, which is part of the noise you're facing, right? All these channels and the amounts of information that come our way. How do I look at this in terms of noise and reducing noise as an individual? Then I'm going to ask you the same question for the scientist.
Well, as an individual, the principle is actually fairly simple. The rules of decision hygiene, and there are several principles of this, they have been verified in research on groups of judgments. But in fact, the individual judge, the decision hygiene applies just as well when you're making individual decisions as when you are making repeated decisions. And so it's a matter of slowing down, but slowing down is only one aspect of it. It's what you do when you slow down that is likely to improve the quality of decision.
So tell us what we should do when you slow down exactly. What's the process there?
Well, that is, of course, a long story, but to give one example, which is, it will sound trivial, except that people don't do it. It is that when you're facing a decision problem, breaking up the problem into aspects and evaluating each aspect independently of the others and waiting to form a general opinion until the end, until the profile of attributes is complete, that turns out to be non-intuitive, and it turns out to be quite important. There are two principles here. One, aspects of judgment have to be independent of each other. That's a basic statistical rule for efficiency. And the other is to delay intuition. Where there is judgment, you don't want to eliminate intuition, but you want to delay it so that it is based on as much information as possible. Those are the basic principles. But they work out in detail, one would have to read the book.
Let me ask you two final questions. One is, we have seen over and over in the last several years algorithms being deeply biased. Is there a risk that they're going to be crippled also because there is too much noise in the data?
Well, the main the bias in algorithm is not an inherent characteristic of algorithm. It's a result of mistakes that people make in building the algorithm, especially in the choice of dependent variables. So bias is really not inherent in algorithmic decision-making. And algorithmic decision-making is essentially guaranteed to reduce noise. And if it is based on a sufficiently large body of data and done competently, then algorithmic decision-making is going to be relatively free of bias and essentially free of noise.
Now, are there some sectors or cases where reducing noise is not the goal? For example, there is a school of thought that thinks that some disorder, some messiness, some chaos is kind of fundamental for creativity, for example. Is noise essential to creativity?
I think that there are the domains in which you want to reduce noise are fairly specific. And this is when you have, for example, an organization and individuals who speak for the organizations, like judges speak for the judicial system, underwriters speak for an insurance company, physicians in some sense speak for the medical system. then you want the representatives of the system to speak in one voice. But when you want to solve problems, when you want to be creative, then of course diversity is essential. And diversity is essential in the process of decision making before you reach conclusions. When you reach conclusions, you're hoping that there will be as little noisy as possible.
Daniel, thank you for being with us and to be available for opening this Sparks event. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Daniel Kahneman.
Bye-bye. Thank you.